Welcome to Ancient Geeks, a podcast from a couple of geeks of a certain age. We look at the development of geek culture through the lens of our youth, as informed by decades of geekery. We were geek before it was chic. I'm your co-host, Stephen Taylor, and I was, in fact, aiming for his head.
I'm your co-host, Tom Grant, and I wasn't aiming at all.
Today in Ancient Geeks, we're talking about the first series of the BBC sci-fi classic Blake 7. So how are you today, Tom?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm quite well, thank you. Before we get started on today's topic, what's going on this week in geekery for you?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Stephen, because now I can put in a plug for the new Ancient Geek Substack that we started. So we decided we don't have even enough time in this podcast to say everything there is to be said about geekdom. So I wrote a couple of posts about just recycled culture in geek culture, and one about solo role playing, and more posts are to come. So that's one geek-like activity I've been engaged in.
Hopefully I will have contributed by the time this posts.
Yeah, so just so kids, just look for the Ancient Geeks Substack on Substack. It shouldn't be too hard to find, and there are links elsewhere that we'll be posting on our social media.
The geek empire increases.
The geek empire. And I'll just also mention that I've been reading the Elric series again for an upcoming podcast. I just finished that reread. How about you?
I'm in my first read of Elric. I had mentioned a while back that I started, and I've gotten deep into it, but I've not caught up to you at this point.
Okay.
But that's been the main thing. And I think, as I mentioned the other day, I started reading Earth X, Marvel Comics miniseries or maxi series, whatever they called it, and then plan to look at some of the Hickman's Fantastic Four run, but I haven't done that yet.
Yeah. I think the only other comics I've been reading lately, aside from those Star Trek comics that I got from the Humble Bundle, was We Three, which I mentioned in a post on the Substack. Hint, hint. Read the Substack.
That's right.
But We Three was really great. Really great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, as I said, we're talking about Blake 7, which was a BBC sci-fi program that aired 4 series, as they say, across the pond, from 1978 to 1981. Each series had 13 episodes. I was aware, looking at the dates, that it hits that Star Wars sweet spot, right after Star Wars. Although it's worth pointing out that the development of the show actually predated Star Wars.
Oh, definitely.
So the proposal was written at least by 1976.
And there was a lot of science fiction during that time on British television.
Yes, there is. So, in fact, it's created by Terry Nation. He was the guy who created the Daleks for Doctor Who and wrote a lot of Doctor Who Dalek stories and a couple of non-Dalek stories, including the classic fourth Doctor serial, The Genesis of the Daleks. And the script editor for this series is a guy named Chris Boucher, who has also had Doctor Who bona fides, writing 3 fourth Doctor serials, including The Face of Evil, which I think is noteworthy, and we'll maybe talk about this a little bit later as well, but that is the episode, or series of episodes that introduced Leela, which was the Doctor's companion. I kind of see some echoes in one of the characters on Blake 7 of that character. Blake 7 is an ensemble of rebels in a dystopian future fighting a totalitarian Terran Federation. I'm sure it's totally coincidental it's the Federation, and that the symbol of the Federation is a sideways delta. Anyway, I will say the show is, for those who haven't seen it, it's somewhat difficult to stream right now. They're currently in a process of releasing the program on Blu-ray sets. The first one came out last December. The second one's coming out this December. So
which you gave me as a birthday present, and thank you again.
Happy birthday! It's
that was
something
a great gift.
Belongs in one's catalog and library, but it also demonstrates on the one hand, it feels like you can stream everything except when you can't, and this sort of falls in that category. And boy, I tell you what. Side note, I looked on eBay because there are DVD versions of this show, but they're almost all in the. And I always forget which it is. They're in the region
2.
Yeah, and so
I think that's Europe, region 2.
Yeah, I think region 2, and it's also they're just some of them are very expensive to get. So there's a limited supply of this. So it's kind of a forbidden fruit or difficult to get, unlike lots of other things these days, I guess. It was, as we'll talk about, it suffered a bit from a limited budget, but it was, I think, in some ways ahead of its time, or it certainly was noteworthy. We'll talk about why that's the case. So we're gonna, for those that haven't seen the show, and Tom has only seen the first series, so I have all the secret knowledge about what happens
All
next.
right.
But we will have a non-spoiler conversation and then a spoiler conversation. Although granted, the show's almost 50 years old, so I mean, what
Hmm.
is spoilers anyway? But I will say that if you have not watched the program, speaking as someone who has, and you want to watch the program, I would stay away from too much reading online because there's some spoilers of note that you probably don't want to know about as you get into it. But
Well, big surprises you've told me are
yeah,
ahead in my viewing of the
there
show.
there are a couple of there's a key plot changes and some character shifts, and I think the ending is something that is better to have not have known what's going to happen.
Hmm.
So, we often talk about, so I didn't ask the question. So before we get into this, what theme music would you choose if we could afford the license?
Well, I think the obvious answer would be the actual Blake Seven theme, so I'm not
Yes.
going to give that answer. I'm going to
Okay.
say at the time that this show was on the BBC, I was big into electronic music.
Hmm.
Like I discovered Walter slash Wendy Carlos, and there was a guy who did music for some of the Peter Gabriel's first solo
Hmm.
albums. Larry Fast. He had his moniker was Synergy, and I listened to those albums a lot. And I think that would be good music for this show. Not just because it's electronic music, but also electronic music from the mid to late 70s.
That works. I'll pick the theme song because it does get stuck in your head. At least get stuck in mine. But and there's not. It's also the only noteworthy music that's linked to the show that I can think of.
Yeah.
So,
They have
we all.
incidental music, but it's pretty
Yeah,
forgettable.
it's
Yeah.
quite bland. Of course, the question of how do we encounter this show is how we often think back. And of course, in my case, I encountered Blake Seven on PBS in Southern California not long after it was on. I'm not sure. I couldn't say what year for certain. It's after I had encountered Doctor Who. Probably Doctor Who is what led me to think maybe there's other British stuff worth watching, sci-fi wise, and I happened to find Blake Seven, and I found it actually was the last episode of the second series that I got literally in the middle of the show. So
Oh
it
man.
created sort of interesting kind of. It took me, in fact, years before I could even see all of the first two series, because again, that was pre-internet, so it was really hard to get these things, and you had to wait until it showed up on TV. And I think maybe in some ways I didn't see some of them until because for a while you could watch all of them on YouTube, but they were pirated.
Yeah. So did you just like turn on the TV and it was there? Or
I
did you
think
seek it out?
I think I may have seen. Maybe I saw in the TV guide or whatever, the
Oh,
insert in the
okay.
newspaper that this show was on. I don't know if I'd seen some reference to it, maybe in Starlog or something. That's possible,
Huh.
but I just happened to turn it on, be watching television at that point in time, and saw the final episode of series two, which
Because
ends on a cliffhanger.
this is the mystery for me. Like, why
Right,
didn't I watch this show?
right,
It would be perfect for me.
yes,
Science fiction, politics,
hmm,
space opera. It pushes all the buttons, and so a lot about myself is a mystery to myself. But I don't really have a good explanation. Like, why did I not watch this until you urged me? You fool! You should
that's
see
right.
this show.
That's right. Well, I think so. Again, we think about themes about how we encounter these properties and how life circumstances shape them, right? So I had to have still been. I think I was still in high school, right? So I think, but that means you were in college,
Yeah,
and just the basic parameters of life often shift what time we have when we're going to be doing these
yeah.
things and whatever else might be distracting us at the moment. And I probably encountered this. I'm guessing. Yeah, I was still in high school. I wasn't. I started dating my wife in the senior year of high school. I'm sure I watched less TV in that semester than the previous semesters. This all this, the kinds of things. Of course, VCRs helped, but you had to know
Right,
to record it.
right.
And that's kind of what happened. Just like with Doctor Who, I just happened to watch it, and you make these choices, and then you fall in love with something, or it becomes sort of a focus. And other things you just never see, like I never watched. We've talked about, in fact, a couple weeks ago, talking about Godzilla. I had never seen any Godzilla movie as a kid,
Hmm. Yeah.
so it just, or talking about Elric. I was aware of the Elric novels, but I never read them for various reasons, either because I couldn't find them at the used bookstore, or maybe I just was distracted by something else, and before you know it, you're in your 50s and you're finally reading Elric. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a combination of kind of pre-streaming of
yes.
serendipity. Like you turn
Hmm.
on the TV and you say, "What the heck is this?
That's right.
I am intrigued." Uh, Also, there were the various gatekeepers or curators of geek culture at the time, like Starlog magazine or Cine Fantastique. I read a lot, which was sort of gave you a lot of behind the scenes looks at how geek cinema got made. They didn't call it that. They had
Hmm.
higher pretensions than just being called geeks, but
Sure.
uh, the as the Frenchified name implies,
That's right.
ciné fantastique. And if something didn't show up there, and a friend didn't tell you about it, and you didn't encounter it on TV, you just didn't know it existed or had a hard
No,
time finding it.
there's no way to. I mean, again,
Yeah,
and I think I said, not to digress too much in this, but we get back to talk about the show. Like, I didn't even really understand, even though I started with the very first episode of the Fourth Doctor, where there is a regeneration, but I had no idea what I was looking at.
yeah.
I
Oh,
didn't
wow.
understand, oh, there's like multiple of these guys until I saw a
Uh-huh.
magazine cover with Peter Davison on the cover. I'm
Huh.
like, that's Doctor Who? Not that the guy with the scarf is Doctor Who. Who's this guy?
Right.
And having to sort of put these pieces together, there was no Googling to figure these things out back in the day. Um, Maybe you found something at the bookstore. Maybe not.
Right.
But anyway, let's
But
so
that's another interesting entry point though that doesn't exist as much anymore.
mhm,
You just like if you don't have record stores, you don't have the person behind the counter
that's right.
telling you things. You certainly have lots of people on the internet, right? There's
Sure.
no end of people on the internet. There's something a little different though, about a person you're talking to face, and you know them to a little extent, even if they're just a distant acquaintance in your social circle, the guy at the comic store or the
Hmm.
woman at the record store or whatever, and you kind of trust their opinions. Hey, I noticed that you bought this book, but maybe you'd also like this other book.
Right.
Anyway, yeah,
That's true. That's true. The discovery process is very different.
yeah.
We're all ruled by the algorithm anyway.
And the algorithm digs you into a very deep and narrow rut sometimes.
It can. It
Like
can.
I was at, sorry for the digression, but I was at a library the other day.
What's
Uh,
that?
uh,
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, it was in Alexandria and it's gone. And knowledge isn't what it used to be. But anyway, it was interesting because like I ran across a book on Mussolini. It was historical fiction about Mussolini, and I realized, okay, I saw this sitting on a shelf. It had a red cover. I could see the spine, and
Hmm.
it had Il Duce on it. And it's like I'm going to grab that book and take a look at it. Where the algorithm on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever would maybe not have led me to that book, even though I would, I would
Right.
be the very right person to read that book.
No, I mean, and not to be overly nostalgic. I mean, on the one hand, absolutely, I agree with you. I miss the serendipity of going in the stacks and finding books that I didn't know
Yes.
existed.
Yeah.
Um, and I would also agree that the Amazon algorithm is kind of, in my view, mediocre in terms of suggestions. Um, but on the flip side, something like Spotify for me has introduced me to all kinds of music I never would have
True.
listened to.
True.
So there are upsides to all this. It's not just all ancient geeks, you know, shaking their fists at the clouds.
Oh no,
But
yeah, it wasn't
yeah,
necessarily better. It was just very
no, but it was
different.
definitely
Yeah.
different. I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked about it before. It's just really striking how much different it is,
Hmm.
and how, and again, something like Blake Seven, to bring it back to the topic of this week, is because right now it's so hard to find anywhere. it's even it
Right.
might be more difficult for someone to encounter because it's not on BritBox, it's not on Prime. I mean, I don't know, can you even buy it on Prime? I forgot. I meant to look if you can
If there's one
digitally
season you can
one
get.
season.
Yeah,
I
that's I think also true on Apple TV. There are a couple of outlets where you can get the first season, but
mhm.
like,
I'm assuming that this is just to try to drive the Blu-ray sales, and
yeah.
then eventually it'll be
Hmm.
available. So, if you are a listener who's intrigued after our conversation, you will at least be able to get the first two seasons soon, and then hopefully soon thereafter the other ones will be released, I hope.
Okay.
Um,
So it's a
anyway,
little bit of a grail quest to find the
sure.
show.
So it makes it more interesting. It's more fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the show in generic terms, and then we'll talk specifically about uh, episodes in the first series. So, but let me ask you this: what what were your initial thoughts having now seen this for the first time? And what would you say to a Greek geek that had not seen it, why they might want to watch it?
Well, I would say to that person, I dearly regret that I did not see this before,
Hmm.
and I'm also just as dearly grateful that you urged me to watch it. It is, as I said, a combination of things I think that will appeal to a lot of listeners here. So if you liked Andor's mix of mature science fiction and space opera and a lot of politics in it. I think that this is a great show. It also has a particularly British cast to the show, not surprisingly, but the British in their science fiction, I think, are often much darker than Americans. I mean, they're willing to, like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, start a comedy with the world being destroyed.
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious, and other things too. Like the Elric series is pretty dark,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's not dark in a darkness for its own sake. It's
right.
saying if we follow the logic of science fiction, that we take an idea to its conclusion, or its reductio ad absurdum, or whatever, that's going to often lead into dark places. And so what you get here in this show is dictatorship, really evil technology, or
Hmm.
not just technology that's abused. It's just nasty technology. I'm not giving anything away, that there's sort of mind wipe technology where
Right.
people's personalities and memories are destroyed and then reconstructed from scratch. Um, Kind of like social media. Uh, there's in the first season, there's a religious fanaticism story
Yes.
that's pretty dark.
For the purposes
There's
of power.
Yeah, exactly, with the genetic autocracy of a group of aliens in another episode. Anyway, so I think that that's, again, not as somebody who loves things that are dark for their own sake, but I
Right.
think exploring things that are worth exploring and facing them bravely is something that this show does really well.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it does have to some degree the typical adventure of the week element of science fiction of the time, but it does
Hmm.
have an overarching, I mean, somewhat loose plot, but there is a story going on behind each episode. It's not just solely self-contained, and some things do follow from episode to episode.
Hmm.
And I think it is subversion is not the right word, but it does kind of to some degree subvert the form in that it does make, again, the Earth and the Federation, they're all evil, and this is a small band of people fighting. That's not totally a new story. I mean, in some ways, this is the story of Star Wars, but
Hmm.
it's done. And granted, it's quite a few years ago. It's not quite the sophistication of Andor, but it is, I think, of that piece. You're right. It's
Right.
a good comp in the sense that it's about why there might be the need to rebel and
Right.
what that might
It,
look
it,
like.
it's not as good as Andor. It's not as good as
No,
Firefly, who
no, but I
I,
think it's
I
a
I would think this the
progenitor of
show,
that.
yeah, definitely a progenitor, and definitely, this hitting a lot of the same notes.
Hmm. And the characters are not. I think the characters are interesting, some more than others. Um, but I think they're not your typical archetypes for a show like this.
No, and surprising in some ways too.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Not as stereotypical as they seem the first time you encounter them.
That's true. That's very true. Um,
I also, by the way, I really like this is you have everybody has their odd tastes. I like shows or books about mysterious alien ships or other things that the characters have to unravel over time,
right.
and that's a big part of this show.
It is.
It's a lot like a show that practically nobody saw, which is again a bit of a shame, and I would recommend to people Stargate Universe,
Hmm.
which I think is just a terrific science fiction show that's kind of set on a spaceship where the people who kind of get on an unplanned excursion with it
Hmm.
have to figure out what the heck is going on with this spaceship. They don't really fully understand.
No, it's an important part of the show. Um, I would say for first viewers, it's sort of an interesting experience, and you can tell me if this is the way you saw it. But it really, there's a the first three episodes, without talking about any content, are kind of a self-contained multi-chapter story
Right.
that in some ways is not like the rest of the show.
No.
And it's sort of, but it's interestingly well done in that sense. And then the show kind of evolves into a more adventure of the week kind of thing, again, with the overarching characters and some plot. What did you think about that aspect of it when you watched it? Did you notice the sort of tonality kind of evolving, or were you just trying to follow what was going on with the characters?
No, it definitely did change. I mean, it was an escape story in the first couple of episodes, and it then, as you said, sort of segues into a combination, kind of like DS9, Deep Space
Hmm.
Nine,
Hmm.
of very clearly self-contained episodic stories, but linked with a meta plot.
I agreed. Agreed. Is there anything non-spoilery you want to talk about before we move into things that may require spoilers?
So I would say that the this is a very character-driven show.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things that I would say to someone who's never seen this before is a virtue that makes it worth watching is that I don't know where all these characters are going because I haven't watched more than the first season. I see a little bit of the development there, but I also can tell that the mind behind the show, Terry Nation,
Hmm.
does have a plan for their development. Like there
Right.
will be something happening. It
Right.
won't be just a rinse and repeat set of episodes. We have a setup and then the minced part of the story and then the resolution and so forth. That these characters are kind of interesting, because they are fighting a galactic tyranny, and in and of themselves they some interesting people. Like Avon really is an intriguing
No,
guy,
I think I think what
especially.
what I would say, and Avon definitely is a standout. I think that you're correct to say that it's a character-driven show. I think
Hmm.
that's true beyond this series. It's not spoiling to say that. And I think that it's one of the things that's super appealing about this show and why, even with the not particularly great special effects, or maybe even some of the episodes are more fillery than others, it is
Hmm.
compelling because of the characters. They're very memorable characters, and I think some that if I were making a pantheon, I mean, some clearly more than others, but I mean, Avon in particular would be, if I were making a list of my favorite characters of all time from TV, SFTV, he would be on the list. Where exactly, I don't know, but he's on the list.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fair.
I think it definitely was ahead of its time.
Yes.
Yeah, in all the ways that we've described here, the meta plot, character-driven
Hmm.
drama, sort of the dark take on the future.
Yes.
That's not something you saw a lot of on televised science fiction up until that point, or more maybe in the science fiction of the movies, but definitely not on TV. I think also too, it is in a way kind of a good pointer further beyond Doctor Who,
Hmm.
to really there's a lot that's worth watching from science fiction on British TV from this period. And
Right.
I'm not a fan of the show UFO or
Hmm.
Space 1999, which has the most absurd premise of any show
It's
in
pretty wacky.
the world of science fiction TV, but or the Thunderbirds. There's a lot better stuff out there to be mined.
Hmm.
From British science fiction of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I had encountered Quatermass before
Hmm.
this. I would cite that as an example. There's for example, like there's like Quatermass series. They were done as
Right.
kind of limited series, and those are really good and imaginative. Like the tripods,
Hmm.
the prisoner, which is
Yes,
fantastic,
very much so.
fan freaking tastic. Other ones I haven't seen that I've heard good things about, like the Tomorrow People and Sapphire and Steel. To a lesser extent, maybe even the Avengers has some science
Right.
fiction
Yeah, it does.
elements in it, and Terry Nation
Hmm.
uh, wrote scripts for that. But all of this is also done on a shoestring budget,
That's right.
and you can look at that and you can laugh. Every once in a while when the cardboard set would wobble in Doctor Who, I would certainly chuckle.
Sure.
Uh, or, planetary governments that consisted of 4 or 5 people. Um, but
Everybody
at
was
the same,
busy.
but at the same time, I have a lot of admiration for people who want to do something big, as we said when we talked about the classic Doctor Who in an earlier episode, or in monster movies of the
Hmm.
1950s. People who have a big idea and they just are going to strain the limits of their budget to its utmost to get that story out there. There's a lot to admire about that particular approach.
No, I absolutely. That's absolutely the case.
Mhm. And
I think it,
sometimes, by the way, you not only get Doctor Who, but you also get an unlimited budget Godzilla minus one.
that's also true.
So just to kind of bring it up to date for people who say, "Yeah, I'm not so convinced about this thesis that Tom and Stephen are talking about here about low budget and its virtues." You get sometimes pretty amazing works of fiction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I started to go off on a reverie about Avatar, which I've never seen, but it just looks like very expensive special effects, and I'm not sure it's much more than that. But
Oh, Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
well, yeah, STMP is a great example. A great example. No, I think that when I always said there was one thing that's unique about it, and then we can move on to speaking about specifics, is the motivations of the characters are not, I may have said this, but they're not typical. And I think that's significant.
Hmm.
It's not just good guys versus bad guys in a really simplistic kind of way,
Right.
which I think is interesting. Anyway,
Yeah. Interesting villains.
also interesting villains, correct.
Yeah.
But you're right, it does foreshadow things like Firefly, DS9,
Hmm.
and other shows of that nature. All right, so if for some reason you're intrigued enough to want to watch this and don't want to hear about any of the specifics, we'll go ahead and shift to a free-for-all wherein spoilers are fair game. We'll talk about characters, we'll talk about episodes. Actually, so what I might suggest, and it's not quite what's on my outline, why don't we talk briefly about the plot of the first three, and that may give us a way to talk about these characters, and then we can talk about specific episodes from there,
Right.
right? So the very first episode, The Way Back, which is in many ways a very unique episode for the entire series, and I will spoil this. To my recollection, they never go back to Earth. Um, and this is the only episode set on Earth. And this we start off with Raj Blake, who is just
Hmm.
a dude who seems kind of a little bit lost and
Yeah.
has been convinced by some compatriot that he should visit with some rebels who live outside the city. And it's very much of a piece of 1970s dystopian science fiction, right? You've got people who are drugged who because so they won't rebel because there's drugs in the food. He's made to fast so that he gets this stuff out of his system. Everyone lives in a big dome city for some reason, and going outside is subversive.
Hmm.
These are all fairly standard, and it feels a bit like Logan's Run or maybe some other examples of 1970s dystopian fiction. Did you have that feel? That's how I always
Oh yeah,
feels.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. And also I would say The Matrix, right? So you have
Yes,
somebody
that's a
who's
good example.
living a very ordinary life, but they just don't realize what's really happening in
Right.
the world around them.
So, he's being told that he was at one point a rebel leader and who had been mind wiped, as you mentioned in the previous
Hmm.
part of the episode. And they were trying to convince him to get him to remember his past. They'd been kept as sort of he had been used as a model prisoner who confessed his crimes and then, went about living a normal life so as to help prop up this totalitarian regime. And of course, while he's at this meeting, there's a massacre, and then he gets captured. He starts to remember things, and then eventually he gets sentenced to go off to a prison planet with a bunch of other people.
Hmm.
And really, we meet two of the characters who become part of Blake Seven at the very end of the episode. Jenna, the pilot smuggler, and Villa Restal, the thief, who looks very like Phil Collins to me. Anyway,
He does. He does.
and we start this weird. This is a totally nonsensical side note. There's this strange function in the future where apparently males go by their last names and females go by their first names.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's Raj Blake, Kerr Avon, it's
Yeah.
Villa Restal, it's Jenna Stannis, but we call Jenna Jenna and we call Blake Avon and Villa by their last names.
Yeah.
And Oleg Gann, who we'll meet later. Anything about, I mean, I'm going kind of quickly, but I don't intend to necessarily do a point by point discussion of these episodes, but anything about that first episode that was noteworthy to you that I didn't mention?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just a straight up good guys and bad guys story.
Right.
I liked the person he had as a lawyer
Hmm.
who was
Oh, yes.
trying to help him, but
Yes.
kind of is really trapped by the evil system that they all live in. So anyway, it was a very good setup, and it was one of those setups I think that didn't take too long with a lot of exposition. It
I
got into
agree.
the action pretty fast, and I that was a good pilot episode.
Absolutely. It's a good intro, but again, it is maybe a little confusing at first because it really isn't what the show's going to be about exactly, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And then the next episode, which is Spacefall, where they are on this ship on their trip to Cygnus Alpha, the prison planet, and we meet more prisoners, including what we'll find out to be part of the Seven, including Craven, who is a computer thief, basically, or he's a computer
Right.
expert who's used it to try to steal money and got caught. He's the cynic, and Oleg Gann, who whose wife had been killed by the Federation, and he freaked out and killed the people that killed his wife, and then he got arrested for murder, and he's a sort of a gentle giant type. And some other
Right.
characters whose names I don't remember now because they end up not being important. But at first, it's kind of unclear who's going to survive and who's not. And of course, this is the episode where they encounter the ship that you were interested in, the Liberator,
Right. The
which is this
Liberator.
alien ship where they send the prisoners over because when they send over the guards, they all get killed. So why not use the Expendables to
Right.
go see if they can capture the ship, which was a dumb move, quite frankly, but because they're able to take control of the ship and escape after
But
some
it
conflict.
is kind of the cruel and stupid thing though that you
Yes,
would imagine kind of security forces in a totalitarian system would do.
correct. Oh no, I think they do a really interesting job about the crew of the ship between the captain, who is not quite as evil as his first in command, but or his first officer, but he's also very
Yeah.
complicit in what the first officer does. He like doesn't really want his hands dirty, but he's kind of willing to let him do what he wants to do.
Hmm.
Regrets it a bit later, but then it all becomes an interesting sort of commentary, I think, on the totalitarian state in that episode.
Yeah. And I think from a character's perspective, I got the impression, for example, like Oleg was, is I'm pronouncing that right? Oleg or Oleg?
Yeah, he goes by Gan, but yeah, Gan, I think it's
Gan.
Oleg. They only say it occasionally. It's
But
Gan.
Gan is one of these people like who is a gentle giant and might
Yes,
wind up doing some sort of self-sacrificial
you're right.
things in the future. He seems like a very decent person you can kind of get on the side of pretty
Hmm.
fast. Avon is one of those characters who seems like he's capable of so much more than what he's doing,
Right.
which I'm sure is where things will head ultimately with this character. But I
Hmm.
don't know. I just see hints of that, kind of
Right.
through
Oh
the
yeah.
first season. Yeah.
Oh, I do love this happens multiple times in the show, but I love the idea that being a computer genius means being able to put probes into machines and like manipulate things like their screws. I don't,
Yeah,
the computers in the future are very weird.
yeah. Well, that dynamic among the characters was really interesting too, because they're not like a Federation command crew.
No,
Uh, very often people just say, "I'm not going to do that."
that's right.
It's
That's
like
right. I don't want to do that.
we need somebody to do this for this mission to succeed. Well, find somebody else.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
part of the dynamic that's very interesting.
Or we need to go to
Um,
this planet. No, that's a stupid idea.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, it's they're all motivated by wanting to get off this prison ship.
Yeah.
Um, Blake is having this political reawakening as he remembers who he is and what his goals are.
Hmm.
You know, but the rest of them just really want to escape, and they're often attempted by other aspects of this whole endeavor. I mean, Avon just wants out of he'll do whatever. I mean, he already had a plan that would have maybe killed everybody else so he could escape.
Yeah.
He's very, very, morally questionable about a lot of what he wants to do. Bill is just a thief and a coward,
Hmm.
and Gans just sort of big-hearted and wants to help out, and
Right.
it is an interesting sort of dynamic. And yeah, I mean, there's various factors. Like later, I forget which episode it is, where they discover not only is this ship, the ship that they take over, the Liberator, which has this AI called Zen that controls the ship, who at first is a little difficult, but they learn how to sort of control and can therefore use this advanced technology in ways that they might not otherwise have been able to do. Not only they have a ship that's faster than anything the Federation has, it's more powerful than the Federation has. It's also full of
Right.
like money. It's got
Hmm.
gems and all. So the temptation to just fly the hell away is an ongoing one for the non-idealists in the group.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun to see them discover how the ship works.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me of there was an old D&D module, Expedition to the
Oh
Barrier
yes. That's
Peaks.
right. Yeah, yeah. We talked about it at one
So it's
point.
like Expedition to the Barrier Peaks in, in a Doctor Who-ish setting.
That's totally fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to figure out how Zen works, to figuring out the teleport system and all these other kinds of
Oh
things.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but
And that is
yeah.
the most comfortable looking bridge, I think, of any
Oh
spaceship
yeah. It's like a yeah, that's so
in
true.
geek culture.
You got the big high back chairs, you got the little lounge area in the
Leather.
front.
I
It's
know,
all
yeah.
great, man.
Yeah,
Um,
they just lack cup holders. They would be complete then.
so and then they get to so Cygnus Alpha, they get the prison planet because I guess some of them are still on the ship and some of them are on the prison ship, some of them still on Liberator. And then we get Brian Blesseding it around for an
I know.
episode.
What did you say?
Brian Blessed.
You didn't say that
Brian.
loudly enough. You mean Brian Blessed?
Fair enough.
I like. There's a funny picture of him from Flash Gordon,
Yes.
and like somebody who put the title, the subtitle on it. I used to think that you couldn't hear a picture.
Oh yeah, that's so true. So true.
It's
So
like one exposure to Brian Blessed, and you know what that joke means.
he plays the aforementioned religious fanatic who's been manipulating the prisoners to create his own little totalitarian society,
Yes,
saying that they have
a pretty nasty one, based
yes,
on
yes,
the big lie
yes,
that anybody who leaves will die
that's right.
because they will lack the medicine needed to keep themselves alive from.
Because apparently there is some sickness they get when they first arrive on the planet, but they do become immune to it. But he says that the
Right.
medicine he gives is what keeps them from dying.
Yes.
And so that's
Yeah, and he's a completely cynical, not surprisingly, power
yes,
mad guy, and
yes.
but not in a cartoony way.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. At first you think he's cartoony, right? Because he's
Right.
doing all the the mumbo jumbo. But then when he has a conversation with Blake, he knows exactly what he's doing. In fact,
Right.
I guess he's one in a long line of guys that have done this, as I recall, because he's not the original one. But
Right.
it's like this is how we're going to survive. This is how we're going to do it. And like a lot of people in power who will justify systems, it just so happens I get to be in charge. But that's
Yeah.
just the price you have to pay for
Right.
for order. So yeah, it's an interesting discussion and continue, as you say, sort of an ongoing examination of political themes in the show.
Yeah. And it's I also like we like to, of course, laugh at Brian Blessed's public persona.
Yes.
Yeah, so broad, so loud, so so Brian Blessed. But
Yes.
both in here and in I Claudius, you can really see what a good actor he
Oh,
is. That
yes. I think
he
that's
can he
true.
can like turn the knob from like projecting compassion and good nature and concern
Hmm.
for his flock, which he did with when he played Augustus on I Claudius, to
Hmm.
real menace, just
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
very naturally and convincingly.
Oh, no. He's murderous in this at times,
Yeah,
in a convincing way. I
right.
agree with that. It's not just all the Brian Blessing around.
Bluster,
Bluster, yeah.
Brian Bluster, blessed.
So these three episodes all kind of work together as a multi-chapter story, and they eventually then all leave on Liberator and to figure out what they're going to do next. And you've got your core characters. As I said, the seven are Blake, Avon, Villa, Jenna, Cal. Oh, we haven't got the Cal yet. Actually, Callie's coming up. We have
Right.
Gan and Zen, so we have six. And then Callie gets found in the next episode. She's a psychic from another planet. Auron, I think she's supposed to. They're supposed to be descendant of humans. It's kind of they don't do a really good job in the show sometimes of delineating whether people are aliens who look human or they're like humans who colonized. It doesn't really matter, I don't think. But I'm not. I've never been totally clear. It probably is stated, and I can't remember whether the Auron are fully alien who just look human or they're human descendants. Do you recall if it was mentioned?
No, I don't recall, but it feels like it's far enough in the future where it could be that these are just subspecies
Yeah,
of Homo
that's
sapiens.
kind of what I thought. But so So once we get into the sort of more adventure of the week kind of thing, well, let me back up because we've talked about Avon.
Mhm.
Is there anything you want to say about Blake as a character?
He's an interesting guy because he's quickly made the leader,
Yes.
but I'm not sure where it's going with him because he doesn't
Hmm.
seem like I I wasn't getting the feels from him that
Hmm.
like he was that inspiring
Right.
to everybody. I mean,
Hmm.
he was sort of like a pragmatic leader.
Right.
These are the things we've got to do, and he was very convincing about it. But they kind of set him up to be this great rebel leader, and just not seeing it. So I don't know if that's something that we're going to find out later, or where he's going to keep running into his limitations. But it's kind of it doesn't seem like an accident. Like the actor isn't very good, and
Hmm.
I can't believe this guy is inspiring. It's like, no, this character doesn't seem exactly what I expected him to be based on the description from the first episode.
I think that's fair. I think that, well, and plus the show's named after him, so he's supposed to be the most important guy, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, it is. I think it's interesting that I mean, he is the most idealistic, although he's not
Yes.
like a starry-eyed idealist exactly. He
No.
is partially motivated. I don't know if revenge is quite the right word, but he's motivated by getting back at the Federation for what he sees as, I think, the general crimes against about the citizens of the Empire or the Federation, and also what happened to him personally. And there is some acquiescence that he's in charge,
Hmm.
but as you pointed out a minute ago, it's not always clear cut. It's not like he's Captain Kirk and whatever he says
No.
goes.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a negotiation.
it's a negotiation is a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Um, and this the constant threat that if you go on this mission and you're not back in time, we're just gonna leave.
Right.
So there is that. Um, then so, but yeah, so yeah, Avon we've already talked Avon, but Avon I think is the more interesting character. He is cynical, but he clearly is willing to go along with some of this stuff.
Hmm.
But there's this question about whether he's just wants to leave. There are a couple of times when he threatens it. There's one time he
Yeah.
almost has the opportunity to do so, doesn't do so. But there's definite conflict with Blake. There's a tension there.
Hmm. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about
They're
Villa?
the two poles of opposition.
Yes, that's correct.
Phyllis seems like like one of these, characters who is cowardly and is a thief, but isn't all bad.
Right.
You know, I-
He's kind of comic relief to a degree.
yeah, yeah.
in a way that
Not the
mostly
strong,
works.
not the strongest character in
Right.
the show, but maybe there's more to come with him. I don't know.
But and then Jenna is the pilot. Has a smuggler's background. I would say that she's lesser developed than some of the characters. I think
Yeah,
that's fair to say. You think
which they
about
make up for by having more frequent costume changes with her.
there's a lot of actually in general there are a lot of costume changes on this show,
Yeah,
and she does change costumes quite a lot. But
I kept wondering like, where is she getting these outfits?
there apparently is a whole room full of clothes.
Apparently,
But Avon changes clothes, and I think even as the
yeah,
show goes on, there seems to be more. And some of them are amazingly crazy costumes. Blake has this one thing where he's got these huge billowing. It's a fairly common one he wears.
yeah.
The big giant sleeves.
The
They're like
puffy
leather.
shirt.
They're puffy shirt, but leather with a green. I don't know.
Uh,
It has a sort of weird Renaissance fair retro space look
huh.
to it. I don't know. So then we get Callie. Callie is again. They pick her up. She's a psychic. Well, she has telepathic powers. Not a psychic. She doesn't predict the future. But she's a freedom fighter who'd been left behind during some conflict by her. She was like the
Hmm.
lone survivor. She joins the crew. She's the one that really the way she speaks, especially early on, kind of like more savagey. She reminds me of Leela from Doctor Who quite a bit.
Yes.
Um, Thoughts about Callie?
I think that probably I'll save him until the next episode.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And Gan's kind of he's just kind of there. He's there when they assume him to be strong or to be proven that the people they're fighting is really strong so he can get beat up. It's kind of like Worf in
Yes.
that regard.
He is. I think that's funny. I had that same thought. Like a couple of episodes, he gets schooled.
Yes, yes. It is so. There is this one obviously from the title of the show, Blake Seven. And of course, the seventh is Zen. Zen's the computer on the ship,
Hmm.
who often early on speaks often in confusing ways, and then over time becomes a little more straightforward. But I always like his intonations, like, information.
Right.
I don't know, it's just fun.
And I like the idea that he became easier to deal with over
Yes,
time.
yes,
That interface between the humans and the machine,
yes,
is something that both the humans and the machine have to perfect over time.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are often various discussions. Avon in particular talks about because he's contemptuous because it's a computer, so he's like, I should be the master of this machine,
Right.
and also points out multiple times that we just have to learn how to speak to this thing.
Hmm.
This happens also toward the end with the AI Orac. We'll talk about that in a minute. Um, what about so? Do you want to go by episode, or do you want to talk about more
Well,
about?
we can talk about how about we just like do our favorites because the next one is one of my favorites
Okay.
from the show. So the next one, the web, uh, really the ship gets hijacked by a mind controlled Callie, the psychic who
Yes.
we were just talking about, and as it turns out, some fellow members of her civilization are really they're genetic engineers on a planet. Uh, they've created this what was intended to be, I guess, a slave race.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where like a lot of like the clever BBC 70s TV costuming
Mm-hmm.
comes, came into play. Like I found these little guys really disturbing.
Oh yeah, they were.
Yeah, and they're relentlessly attacking at every opportunity these kind of pale aristocratic, sorts of beings who, anyway, it was kind of set up as, being this, kind of terrible experiment that they decided that they didn't particularly like the outcome of their genetic manipulations, so they were just going to commit genocide.
Right. That's right.
It's like, wow, this is really dark.
Yeah, very much so.
But very good. This
Yeah.
is like this is, I think, probably the most science fiction-y of the stories to date, that in this series.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, I think, also an example. It is Adventure of the Week kind of stuff. It's not
Right.
quite as connected to the plot as some of the other episodes. Again, the plot is not super well developed. But I mean, so the previous episode, which was Time Squad, which is the one where they encounter Cali, they're actually
Yeah.
attacking the Federation, and there is They are being pursued in this episode, but I'm not sure it's a B plot. It's more like almost a C plot that they're being pursued
Right.
by Federation pursuit ships. And at this point, we don't really have a good sense of the antagonists. And the next episode actually was one of my favorites, which is Seek, Locate, Destroy. Is we get introduced to both Space Commander Travis and the Supreme Commander Servalan, who are the
Right.
main antagonists throughout the rest of the episode, series, and and perhaps later. But so one of the things that I really liked about the episode Seek, Locate, Destroy is that it really demonstrates that what these guys, and in some ways also in Time Squad, but especially this one, they're terrorists. They're willing to blow things up
Yeah.
to have an effect on the Federation. In this case, they're trying to steal some technology, a device that would allow them to translate Federation code, and they're going to blow up this facility to cover the stealing of this particular device. Now, the one thing I will say about the episode, and maybe it's a function of, in this case, late 1970s television, they don't quite go all the way into being terrorists because although I can't figure out this, they capture a lot of the Federation troops and put them in a room and some of the
Hmm.
scientists, and they're going to blow the place up.
Right.
So to some degree, I'm like, not to be cold-blooded, why do they just kill these people and steal this device? Why do they capture them and then blow the place up?
Yeah. Right.
It's gonna kill some of them. And although clearly their explosion's not quite as powerful as they thought it was going to be, because
Hmm.
Callie gets knocked out and doesn't die, and they don't really incinerate the space where this device was stolen from because they figure out what
Hmm.
they were doing. Travis figures it out. But so I'm not sure if it's supposed to be that they made a mistake or the writers weren't willing to go all the way with what they were trying to do in 1978. But what was your impression of all of this? And what did you think of Servalan and Travis?
So this is, I think, our first introduction to the main antagonists,
Mm-hmm.
and they were a little campy, I thought at
Fair?
first. I think they vastly improve
Mm-hmm.
as villains in the later story. I think yeah, as actors, I think I liked the woman who played Servalan better than the
Mm-hmm.
actor who played Travis.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, she seemed to have just a little bit more finesse as in her acting than he did. He was sort of the constant. We must find this Blake, and I must kill
Yeah,
him.
that's right. That's right.
Sort of
Yes, that's right.
performance.
That's right.
Yeah.
He hates him.
Yes.
He.
That Blake, he has escaped yet again, but he
He.
will not escape a second time. Anyway.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I do agree. Servalan, she just kind of vamp about a bit, and she is a little campy to some degree. I
Right.
do think, and I don't know. There's something about anytime you append the word space in front of a rank, it already just doesn't quite sound right. Um, but yeah. Um,
I remember I was at a theater once and we were watching Forbidden Planet. This was at the Balboa Theater
mhm, mhm,
in
mhm.
Newport Beach. It kind of turned into a spontaneous mystery science theater like
Right.
experience. And like one of the crew of the Earth ship is like he's being punished for basically being accused of falling asleep at his guard post. And Leslie Deal says, "I'm going to dock your space pay."
That's
And
right.
somebody in the audience yells, "What? No space pay?" Yes,
I'm going to take space dollars out of your space bank account.
that's right. And I'm going to send you to Space HR.
Oh, dear Lord, for your space nap. Anyway, so but Travis becomes an ongoing concern throughout and as does Servalan. So, I mean, what other episodes? We don't just need to go
Through
one by
all of them. Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
So what other ones did you like and why did you like him and which
So
ones maybe
I
were a
like
little less
Project
likey?
Avalon. Project Avalon was
Yes,
a good political thriller.
agreed.
They're trying to find somebody who's an important figure in the resistance, and it's not clear if this is even the right person.
Right.
Anyway, that was really good. I'll mention that one. And I say the other one that stood out was Bounty,
Mm-hmm.
where they're supposed to go get he was like the president of the
He was a former
Federation,
president who's
former
an
president of the
exile.
Federation, who's an odd bird.
He just liked his car.
Exactly. Yes. That's a great thing about British TV, like the Avengers. Like they'd stick in these old
Old
cars that
cars. Yeah. Yeah, this
are
guy
really
has some
quite
kind of
lovely.
weird 20th century fetish, and he's got like a turntable and
Right.
whatnot. Yeah.
But it seems I don't know. A lot of shows do that sometimes. Like whenever you like in Star Trek, they would talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
the great artists and musicians of past history, and it was always 20th century.
Of course.
Like the only good stuff ever came out of the 20th century. Here it was just a guy who was a collector who.
Yes.
But anyway, that was really good. He seemed like a buffoon at first,
Yes.
but he wasn't.
Right. Right.
I thought that was really good, and his assistant was kind of an interesting
Yes.
character.
Yes.
So anyway, those are the ones I would call out as my favorites among
So, I mean, I
the
think
first
also
season.
one of the things from what some of we just talked about, there is this sort of ongoing notion that there is some rebellion against the Federation, and that Blake's goal should be to try to tap into these smaller disparate cells and try to figure out how they can better fight the Federation. That was always interesting about the first series, I thought.
Yeah,
And then the
yeah,
culmination is of the series is when they encounter Inzor and Orak.
hmm
What do you think about Orak?
I wasn't sure what to make of it, to be
Okay.
honest. It was the supercomputer, but it, it, why was it so important? I mean, it wasn't totally clear to me. Maybe that was just my fault. Uh, Go ahead.
No, I mean, I try to look at it from what it was in the context, because Orak, I'm not a big spoiler, is an ongoing presence into the
Yeah,
future. Um, what I was struck by watching it this time was the degree to which it really was an ultimate AI in the current context, even though that's not what anyone would have understood AI in 1976 or 77 when he wrote
right,
this thing. Because the whole idea of ORAC is ORAC can connect all computers everywhere, even without a direct connection, and draw all the knowledge and
right,
compile and analyze it.
and
Which
make
is,
predictions.
yeah, the prediction thing, this is a spoiler, but it doesn't really remain an active element. It's, I think, in some ways a plot contrivance for the cliffhanger that is at the end of the series.
Yeah, because it could make a prediction but not explain it, which seemed
Right,
odd.
right, right,
That
right.
that was the part I didn't get.
Yeah, yeah. And so if you focus too much on that, and again, I'm revealing something to a degree, it kind of misses the point. I think
Uh,
Orac is, I just think it's an interesting, it really is what we're told AI can do now, which is take all the knowledge and analyze it in a way that, a mere human brain couldn't do.
right.
Um, so that's kind of the whole point of it. And also I think the degree to which well, there's some capabilities that are demonstrated later that would fit into that parameter. I'm not sure it would be a spoiler, but
hmm
I'll leave it alone. But and of course, part of it is just having a computer that talks back, I guess, is
Right.
part of the appeal.
But dramatically, like if you don't really fully understand something, like that, like the Liberator, the spaceship,
Yeah,
you're going to learn more about
right,
as the characters discover more things about that piece of technology. That's perfectly fine.
right.
And also clearly that the Federation wanted this device meant that they needed to keep it out of the hands of the Federation.
Yes, yes. I mean, in some ways, in those episodes, and maybe even to some degree in the next episode, Orek is a bit of the MacGuffin, to use that terminology, but then
Yeah.
becomes more than that, I suppose.
Yeah. The only weakness that I think of this episode really was just having the two main villains be the only people effectively chasing down
Right.
Blake and
No,
company,
I agree.
through a
No,
bunch of tunnels, and that was a little hokey.
then you do get at that point the problem you mentioned about British sci-fi is like
Right.
somehow two of the most prominent leaders in all of the Federation are the ones crawling around in a tunnel. I mean, why
Right.
is Servalan there? She shouldn't be there.
No.
And shouldn't they have more troops, ships? I think there may be some, I
Yeah.
forget now, hand wavy reason why they were doing this because of the secrecy, but it didn't make a lot of sense. It was obviously budgetary constraints, and
Mhm.
therefore that drives the way you write the story.
Yeah.
And of course, it does have, and I mentioned it, that was the joke at the beginning of the episode. It has one of my favorite Avon moments of all time when he rescues Blake, who's in the crosshairs of Travis and Servalan, where he he hits the weapon and someone says, "Great shot, Avon," and he goes, "I was aiming for his head." It's just a perfect Avon
Yeah.
moment. So, anyway, um, so I guess the having watched all this, you were intrigued enough to want to watch the next series.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
Were there any other characters that you thought were worth even mentioning beyond the ones we've talked about?
I can't. I'm looking kind of at the summaries of all the plots to look back. I mean, again, I think the Project Avalon episode had some good characters in it, such as the person who turns out to be Avalon.
Hmm.
So anyway, I that was the only one I would mention.
Right. The other thing that I would mention, it is striking to some degree that a lot of these one-off characters are not very memorable, really.
Yeah.
I would point to the episode Duel, which in some ways is a rewrite
Oh,
of Arena from Star Trek,
you
where
think?
Blake and yeah, where
A
Blake
little
and
bit?
a little bit Blake and Travis are on this planet to fight it out, and they can all watch it on TV. Um, Although again, another great Avon bit is when he goes to sleep because they're both hanging out in trees and says something to the effect of, "Unless they're going to start throwing nuts at one another, nothing's going to happen
Right.
tonight. I'm gonna go catch some sleep." Um, but the mutoid in that episode, that whole mutoid stuff, I thought was
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Right, this whole these genetically manipulated persons who were used as shock troops. In this case, also
Yes.
as a pilot, and they you drink the blood of their victims as a way of
Yeah, that was
yeah.
yeah, that was like something out of not just like British science fiction, but also like French
Mm.
like science fiction, especially in the comics. It was that was good. Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me of that.
But that was yeah. But
The space witches were a
made
little
no sense.
woo
Made
woo.
very woo
Yeah.
woo.
Yeah.
And it's a typical you must fight to the death, except I'm not going to kill today,
Right.
and be rewarded for that. Okay, well, isn't that nice?
Yes. And also too, just to repeat myself, maybe Travis should reconsider that he's possibly jinxing the situation every time he says, "Ah, Blake, you will not escape from me this time."
So
And
here's a
then he
question.
escapes.
Here's a question about Travis.
Yeah.
What's your interpretation of his face?
Of his face?
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't really explain it, do they?
Well, they say that it all happened and it's Blake's fault. But
Right. They don't fully explain it,
when I
right?
when I
But
first saw it as a kid, I thought there was supposed to be some kind of like just a mask or something, or some kind of like
yeah.
material. And then watching it this time, I'm like, are they implying that his face is all burnt up like that, and it's like his skin's all
Oh,
crispy?
I
You
didn't
see what I
take it
mean?
that way. I thought it was
Okay,
like a Phantom of the Opera sort of half
okay,
mask.
I just I don't know. There was some reference to his face, and I don't know. It was just it's again, it's rather not super impressive makeup work. So
No, no. And his
anyway,
his his finger guns,
yes,
yeah, I that was kind of cool, but
yeah,
I also wondered like why doesn't this isn't this technology more widely available?
that's right.
It would seem to be the thing like that Servalon, the other villain,
Yeah.
you'd have some version of that, a glove or something that you'd wear that would have
Well,
the
my
weapon
my
built in.
interpretation of that is that his arm was destroyed, and instead of getting like a fully functional arm back, he was willing to make his arm into a weapon because he was so fanatical. That was some reference at some point about
Oh, I
that.
remember hearing that, but still, like
I
if you can
agree. Yeah.
miniaturize the technology enough, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
is it
Yeah.
that you just can't like stuff enough AA batteries into
I don't
into a
know.
glove? You have to have a full hand in order to carry the batteries. I don't know.
The giant ring. Anyway, I don't
Yeah.
know. But yes. Okay. So, um, anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about?
Well, again, I think that this is really a show that was ahead of its time, and it might not be the best show of its
Hmm.
era, uh, but it's A, definitely this should be on people's watch list, and
Yes.
B, just, again, hats off to the originality of the show and the ability to do a lot with a little.
Agreed.
Just to
Agreed.
recap what I said before.
I'll just add that I really like the ship. I think the ship's cool.
Oh, the ship's great. Yeah. Is that going to come
It,
up in merch?
it might.
Are you foreshadowing?
It could
Okay.
be. Good stuff. Liberator and Zen are both great. Anyway, Okay, so having said that, and speaking of the next question, merch. So obviously you didn't have any merch because you only saw the show
No.
within the last however many weeks or months. What would you like to have if you
Well,
could
I
have
could
some
have,
merch?
there could have been something around the house that some object that they repurposed into a weapon or so I think we're both going to say the Liberator model,
Sure. Oh yeah.
especially if it flies,
Especially if it
especially
flies.
if it flies.
A Liberator drone
Not the guns, not the guns,
with the
cattle
guns are
prods.
great. They're the cattle prod guns that have to plug in like our with 1980s headphone jacks.
Yeah,
Um,
not those. That could be part of a Halloween costume that nobody would get,
yeah,
except
yeah.
like
With
if you were at the
no,
same party as
yeah,
that I was
the
at. Yeah.
guns and the teleport bracelets and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Yes.
Oh yeah, lots of that rainbow sort of foil that you'd stick on things in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
They'd make them look a little psychedelic. Anyway, that's
Yeah. I did have some merch. I still have.
aha.
I had a pretty large enamel pin of the Blake Seven logo with the you know,
Hmm.
with the one that
Yeah.
kind of shows up at the end during
Hmm.
the title sequence. And I did have several books. So there were a series of novels, one of which tried to continue the series after the fourth series, and then there was one that I was excited to get and was maybe one of the more disappointing books I've ever read. Paul Darrow, who plays Craven,
Hmm.
wrote a book called Avon, A Terrible Aspect, which is not a very good title either, but it was purported to be Avon's like backstory.
Okay.
It's not a very good book.
Oh, so it's
Bless,
not like Andrew Robinson's A Stitch in Time
no,
or whatever
bless,
that's the title
bless
of that
Darrow's
is.
heart, but I
Yeah.
mean, and I haven't read it in a long time, and I don't even have it anymore. But as I recall, he didn't fully understand the concept of like interstellar space, but like everything he was all taking place in the solar system. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. It was like
Huh.
really bizarre. Now I may be misremembering some of that, but I know some of it did take place in the solar system, but it made it seem like it was bigger than it was. It was very weird. It
Okay,
just
so this
wasn't
is
a
so
very
you
good
hit a
book.
pet peeve of mine.
Okay,
So if you're going to write science fiction, you need to know the difference between a solar system and a
it helps. Yes,
galaxy and the universe. And
yes.
weirdly, a lot of people who write, science fiction TV or movies don't understand.
No, there's a lot of distance problems with certain programs
Yeah.
and movies I could
Well,
name.
just sort of existential problems, like they're
Yes,
talking about the solar system as if it were the whole galaxy.
yes.
No, 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 no. Anyway,
There's some issues there. I
I feel
concur.
better having said that.
If so, and yeah, if I my wants, I would a Liberator miniature would probably be number one.
Yeah.
But if AI is going to take over the world, I would really want my own Orac. That'd be fine too.
Yeah. Okay. Benevolent AI.
Well, one that I can argue with and turn off when I wanted to.
Well, I'd say the Liberator model is really original. Yeah,
Yeah, it really is cool.
it's original. I wouldn't say it's original to the level of, let's say, the Millennium Falcon. Like oh, I don't expect a spaceship to look like that,
Right.
but definitely original. It's
I
a
don't know. I
cool
guess
looking ship.
in some ways I would say that. So we take the original Enterprise, the Millennium Falcon, and the Liberator. I think are all kind of unique in their own way,
Yeah,
and different. And I guess the Liberator does build a little bit on the Enterprise with the sort of all the all the
yeah.
tubes and whatnot. But the three in the cells in the middle, or if you would use that terminology, and then the middle section is just a unique look.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It has sort of like a retro rocket ship look to
yeah,
it,
it does.
but
There is,
it's not pointed the same way, right?
and that's right. And I
Yeah.
can't remember what species it is, but if you watch Babylon 5, there is a ship in Babylon 5 that is clearly an homage to the Liberator, a class of ships. I can't remember if it was the Drazi or the Marquette. I can't remember
Yeah.
who. It was one of those secondary races. And I'm probably forgetting which one it is, but it shows up and it's kind of fun in that sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that brings us to the conclusion of this week's scintillating episode of Ancient Geeks.
Well, we don't have a cliffhanger.
No, we don't. Well, the cliffhanger is when we talk about series 2 of Blake 7. That's the cliffhanger.
Oh my God.
Who can say?
Who can say?
Maybe in January. I don't know, but or later. Who can say indeed? But thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Time for us to blast off to further geek adventures. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, and even better, tell a friend. We also appreciate any reviews you want to leave on the app or platform of your choice. And if you want to give us feedback more directly, drop us a line at someancientgeeks@gmail.com. You can find us on social media outlets like Blue Sky, Reddit, and Facebook. And now you can also find us on our new Substack, someancientgeek.substack.com. All content is copyright 2025, Tom Grant and Stephen Taylor. Music by Reversed Image, whom you can find on Pixabay. See you next time.
Suddenly I'm hip deep in heroes.